This is Dr. Naureen Sohail, and you're listening to Illuminate. Today, we are going to talk about suffering and hardship. Suffering, pain, and hardship are part of our life. Every day, we see people go through immense suffering, excruciating pain, and surmountable hardships, losing their loved ones, bearing illnesses and diseases for self, partners, or their children. We see, hear, and learn from history downfall or eradication of empires because of famine, disease, natural disasters. And we wonder God is merciful and gracious. Why would he harm his own creation? From the writings of the promised Messiah, al-Islam, I understand that there are two reasons God gives suffering to people. Number one, as a trial or turbulence to bring them closer to himself. Number two, as his wrath, as a penalty. To understand this better, let me tell you a story. You may have heard this story before, but let's listen to it one more time. Once upon a time, long, long ago, there was a traveler. One day during one of his expeditions, he was walking through a forest. He was tired and wanted to rest. He found a small clearing surrounded by foliage. He lay down in the cool of the earth and closed his eyes, enjoying the peace and quiet of nature. Suddenly, he heard rustling of leaves. He opened his eyes and looked around, but he couldn't see anything noticeable. He was about to go back to his nap when he heard the rustling of leaves again. He saw right above him a cocoon with the butterfly inside. The baby butterfly was trying to get out of the cocoon from a tiny opening. Each time the butterfly pushed and pushed, but couldn't squeeze itself out. Each time, after a long, exhausting struggle, it would fall back in the cocoon. After a while, it would gather its energy again and then try to push itself out again. The man saw the hardship of the butterfly and felt sad for it. He decided to help it out. He took a scissors from his luggage and cut open the hole in the cocoon to make it bigger. Out came a plump butterfly and fell on the ground. It had a swollen body and shriveled up wings. Trying to help again, the man picked up the butterfly and gave it a boost by his hands to help it to fly. But the butterfly's shriveled wings couldn't bear the weight of its swollen body, and it fell on the ground again. You see, what the man didn't understand was that the butterfly's body had to squeeze through the tiny hole in the cocoon so it could push fluid from its body to its wings. In this process, the butterfly's body gets smaller and lighter, and the wings get bigger and stronger. That is God's way of making sure that the wings can bear the weight of the tiny body and the butterfly flies higher, longer, farther, and needs minimal rest. Moral of the story? When God gives you trials and tribulations, He's actually making sure that you fly high in this world and in the spiritual world, and not necessarily as a penalty. Now, how would we know that it is a blessing or a punishment? Well, if the trial brings you closer to Allah Ta'ala, then it is a trial, and it takes you away from Allah Ta'ala, then it is His wrath. You can even change His wrath into a blessing by showing humility and seeking forgiveness. Allah Ta'ala is most forgiving and ever merciful. Promised Messiah Islam says, trials are a means of strengthening the believer's faith, because at that time a feeling of humility and helplessness develops in the soul, and fervor and passion arise in the heart from which she turns to God Almighty. The fervor and passion arises only in the heart of pious people. The 5 stages of grief states that a person goes through 5 stages before coming at peace with their grief. The 5 stages are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. It is only the trust in Allah Ta'ala that helps you move along the various stages. Getting stuck in one or the other of these stages may distance one from Allah the Creator. It is when we understand that these trials and tribulations are a means of our spiritual and emotional growth. It is then that we understand that only Allah can alleviate this pain. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do anything about it. What I'm saying is that we look towards Allah Ta'ala to guide us to what actions to take to alleviate the pain. Going back to the GPS analogy, using Allah Ta'ala as the satellite to guide our GPS, and then following the GPS. Keep praying and strengthen your relationship to Allah Ta'ala. Until next time. This podcast is a humble effort in gratitude to Allah Ta'ala. This podcast is based on Dr. Naureen Sohail's observations, personal experiences, thoughts, and learning while navigating her own life as a Canadian Muslim.